insight. It's on the same theme. We are all human. That's, I think, the message. We are different, but we have common, universal principles and dreams, which we can get together to achievement. You see in your program that Mr. Ulf Borbos from the Science Parks is not here with us today. He had to attend some urgent family matter. It shows that also here we care about family. But that means that we have now, we can decide to take a coffee break now. If you think that's fine, a short coffee break. After that, we will have also a panel discussion. You may pose questions to the speakers of the afternoon session, including also some of the speakers from the morning session are still here. So you can also, we have Tora Westby, Lars, Ulf, and myself are also here. So you are welcome. You can take a short break and come back in 10 minutes.
I was asked to sit by the panel, but can I give you a question first? It will be a little bit, strange if I'm sitting in the panel asking the panel. I have a question, but we are talking about how to behave and how we can understand China, to do business in China. But as you know, this is both ways. And I'm thinking that we have to change our way of acting to do business in China. What about the other way? Are the Chinese changeable and accepting our way of thinking, doing?
Mike,
I can start. My experience is that while we see difficulties in working in China with Chinese, they see the same difficulties, but the other way around. We don't understand Chinese way of thinking, but they don't understand our way of thinking. So we need to find bridges between Sweden, Europe, and China, both ways. And this is what I'm learning. So it's not about we need to learn about them, it's the other way around. So that is why we need people that we work with that are trained to understand and knowledge. We need to help Chinese people here to understand our way of thinking, doing, behaving. That is very much different. I would say the same way. Jasmine, what would you comment on this?
I would say Chinese are very pragmatic. Many times we don't know whether this is right or wrong. Then from our research project, the symbiotic business model, we also see that Chinese government carry out experiment together with business sector together, and then sometimes we run too fast. Then we say, guys, wrong direction. Then government can adjust. Sometimes quicker, sometimes slower. But this is the Chinese government way. We do it, and then we correct, we modify on the way. This is the Chinese approach. So Chinese are very pragmatic. When they come to the Western context, we have been bringing the VP, right, of the Chinese company for a business tour in Sweden. They are Chinese companies' internationalization process is just started, right? So Chinese business people are learning. They are willing to learn, but sometimes the culture difference exists as a place they don't even aware of. So it was during we were visiting a Swedish company, the VP of government. Then the CEO of the Swedish company asked a question to the Chinese side. Then the Chinese VP asked his team directly to discuss how to answer this question without notifying the Swedish side. Please, this question I have to discuss with my colleague, and then I can give you a better answer. Now he just directly talking Chinese to the colleague and going on some time. Then the Swedish CEO was, what is going on? Then I saw it, I said, he's asking his Chinese to get colleague to get data to give you better answer. So this is an illustration that we are just started internationalization process and working in the international collaboration and context. So many times probably we are not experienced. Here, I mean Chinese business people are not experienced in the international arena yet. we are developing and learning, but we can make mistakes.
Maybe I could say something briefly. This question of understanding one another is a long-term process of building not only trust but communication, which occurs through the transmission of culture occurs through language. And just very briefly, there was a 150th celebration of the last spike that was put down in the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States in Utah just this last month. And it was attended by the U.S.-Chinese ambassador and other diplomats, as well as members of the government of the state of Utah, not the U.S. government. But in this report, there was very clear that the Chinese had played a very crucial role in working to build this Transcontinental Railroad, which, as I pointed out, was a project that was part of the thinking. But coming out of that particular meeting, it was pointed out that in Utah, it's not a big state, but the most popular language right now that people in Utah and the parents want to learn is Chinese, Mandarin. Now, you wouldn't know that if you hear how the neocons want to close all the Confucius institutes and so forth. So among normal people, there is an understanding that to build bridges, we have to communicate and build cultural links. So I would just add that.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing? Working with Chinese in China, I learned that we need to have interpreters because so few speak English. And then when you interpret, it's not only about interpreting words, sentences, it's about interpreting context and culture barriers, which is more complicated. That means the interpreters need to know much more than language. And this is a mistake we do in the West. We take young people, good English speaking, we put them in and say, oh, you are good in English, you can be the interpreter. And one day we were sitting in a meeting with the president of one university, and we had a discussion. Jasmine was helping our side, and the Chinese side had another interpreter. And then after about half an hour, Jasmine came close to me and said, she's only translating about 50% of what you say. That means 50% of what I say is being lost. It took me 5 minutes to change discussion in a way that we could put Jasmine as an interpreter for both sides. We had a seminar of 6 Swedish senior professors and the same from the Chinese side. And we took in professional interpreters to have high quality interpreting situation. And Jasmine came to me after half a day session. They don't work. There's very low quality interpretation. Then we had to take them aside and put in her colleague as market teachers, because then quality of interpretation was much improved. So you need to be aware of that this is a complicated issue. You need to work with people that you can trust, and they can tell you that there is a problem to handle. That is also part of that issue.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I had 2 questions to the panelists, but mostly Mike, who said that you mentioned the change in the business culture in Sweden generally since the 70s, 80s, and the fact that, for example, a business manager, they are ready to pay $500,000 for a business manager, but they're not willing to learn the lessons, because the business model we have now is like with what we in Swedish call kvartalsrapportering. You have to show reports every half a year, 3 months of what you are doing. So you have no time as a manager to learn a new culture, because you have to deliver results to the stockholders almost every 3 months. So is that an obstacle? And then the Chinese have also a term they use, everything you do should be result-based. If you don't deliver results, then that's a failed way of working. What is the difference between the two?
Difficult question. while we have this kind of control report, quarterly based reporting system, Chinese also have a similar KPI systems that are being evaluated on, and that goes all the way in the hierarchy system. So they also have it. But my understanding is the speed in China and the whole experimental orientation of the society and company is very much different than we are. We are analyzing, discussing, and we can go for years. And Chinese think differently. They say, do we want to go there? Yes, we want to go there. Okay, let's go. But how? I don't know. Let's try and see. We learn on the way. Well, this was not the best. Ah, yes. We go this way. So they are pragmatic. And all the way from the political level to the country level. They're more pragmatic within the political. But they're very much pragmatic, achieving results step by step. But they also have this kind of KPI evaluation system that are creating barriers of another kind. But what I also see in the Swedish companies that I met is that they're trying to cut the cost by reducing the Swedish cost, Swedish staff. And what they lose is a Swedish identity. And it's this kind of, what Dasmi said about perception of Swedish company, Swedish original company, is being lost. And that, I think, don't have a price on it. We are biting ourselves in the back when we are that short-sighted. But there is a company going the other way around, and that is IKEA. And there are putting quite many Swedes in the different stores to keep this kind of Swedish culture alive. So there are exceptions of this pattern that I see.
I have one more question, but maybe to Ulf. It's part of, maybe you can put the two together.
I have a question to Suchi, if it's possible.
Okay. No, because we want to go back to the question of the Belt and Road.
Okay.
Because the same way some people explain that, or in discussions, that Swedes or Europeans' idea about China is the China of the 1970s. You know, people on bicycles, and it's a dictatorship, blah, blah, blah. But also I think people have, both here, but also the Chinese, and I know from Arabs, Iraqis, and Africans, they have the idea that China, Sweden and Europe is the same as the Sweden of the 70s. Everything works, the trains run on time, they have the best healthcare system, you know, they have the best education system. But when you talk to Swedes, or you listen to Swedish politicians when they're election campaigns, the trains never go on time, the infrastructure is collapsing, the electricity is not going to be enough for everybody starting from this summer. We have electricity shortages in Sweden. The healthcare system has collapsed already in Sweden. The education system, most of it, which is not privately financed for rich families, has already collapsed. So there's the similar situation, but the opposite way, how we see. So the question of, as you said, Ulf, that the question of joining the Belt and Road is not simply helping Africa or helping China build railways somewhere else. We have deep, deep problems here. We need to revive something. What is that?
Well, absolutely. There's a lot to say about that because Sweden has this tremendous problems of collapse, and we every time the Chinese delegations come here, everyone speaks about how good Sweden is, how good technology, everything like this. But the Chinese are not told that they are actually needed to help out to bring Sweden back to its senses, because Sweden has a policy now which is very, very hostile to all kinds of nations in the world. We have a kind of imperialistic idea about culture, about foreign aid, and we are dictating to one country after the other what they should do and not do, especially about human rights and things like that. And environment. So this kind of things is destroying our possibility to have real contact with other nations. And actually, it seems that the media, the politicians, they think these things are more important to appeal to the population and to the media than to really fight for real development and for trust in other peoples. So in that way, we have a huge problem here in Sweden to to reshape the discussion into the real development of people. And as the ambassador said here, the hunger question, people having no food, that's the first thing, human right issue. If you have no food, why should you have a pencil? Why should you have any other human rights? Because the only thing you can think about is to get food the next hour, so otherwise you die. So this is a huge human rights issue that China is intervening to solve. And they are in this way champions of human rights. And then all the time we have these complaints about human rights in China all the time. Actually, we in Sweden are taking part in British and American and other Western support of terrorist operations that is going into different countries. Like as I said, we are supporting the rebellion in Syria with jihadists. And they are in Syria. These people, the jihad, are training the Xinjiang rebels who are doing terrorism in China. So we are at the same time supporting the human rights violations and creating a catastrophe of civil war situation in China. At the same time, we complain about human rights situation in China.
From student perspective, at that time, we outside of the academic schedule, we also discussed about several things that we found in China. Since we are coming from different countries, so we try to compare from German, Indonesia, Colombia, and also Sweden at that time. I think when it comes to collaboration between Sweden and China, it needs to be done in all levels, not only from academic or education, but also in the more higher level on that. Because let's say that I came here to Sweden, also it's under the cooperation between Sweden and Indonesia, bilateral cooperation between them. So from that perspective, I could also go back home to Indonesia and share about my experience in Sweden. So those activity also needed from higher level, but from university level, I would say that more exchange are needed and maybe also longer term. Because in 2 months, we got quite a good experience, but actually I think we need more. The good thing about that program as well, that Professor Mike let us to go for a week to wherever that we want. So 6 weeks of academic courses, activities. Then 1 week we can go to travel to any kind of cities or any cultures, anything that we want to see. But then we come back to share what actually we found for that 1 week in China. And then we kind of share our perspective that is different from each other's. One thing that I can share that maybe I also saw that my German friends, they tend to go separately by themselves. There are 3, but they go really separately. One go to some cities, one go to the other cities, and so on. But let's say that me and my Colombian friend, that we tend to stick together because maybe we are also coming from developing countries, and in our countries we have similar cultures. And at the end, we share that to our group, but we didn't really share much to Chinese students because our program was only for Halmstad University students at that time. So the point is, the conclusion is, I think we need more exchange, and not only in Halmstad University, but also in the other universities. That would help. Yeah, I hope that answered.
I can add one little thing. This program we developed that we bring students to China, it is based on this kind of insight that doesn't matter how much you read here in Sweden about China, doesn't matter how many movies you watch, you don't understand what China is until you come to China. And you have to spend some time to grasp it, to feel it, to experience. And you need to be with Chinese, you need to eat Chinese food, talk with Chinese people, to really understand what is China about. And this is why I bring them for 2 months, training them, doing business in China. One course, another course is innovation management of technology, because China has become one of the leading nations in innovation and technology management. And the third one, Mandarin, because the language is the bridge between cultures. After some weeks, they start to understand. Yes, they need to be there to understand.
Okay. Then Alex can ask this question.
Actually, I was supporting Mike to carry out this program. At the summer meeting, I think the German students mentioned, before they come to China, they think of China as market. But after the trip, they perceive China as partner, potential partners that can work together. So before they were thinking, what can Europeans to bring things to sell into China? And after the trip, they realized, okay, they have developed so much in this field and that field. What can we do together with them? So they start to perceive China as a partner, and also they feel that what they see and they experience in China is so different from what they heard from the media when they're back home. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Alex, and I have two questions. First, very good discussion, and I agree with Jasmine that China, in many cases, are a big market, but at the same time, it's more than a big market. And we talk a lot about innovation here, and I also studied at Hamsa University 9 years ago, and I took the master program in innovation. At that time, 9 years ago, innovation is a phrase that didn't really exist in China. And entrepreneurship was also that time very new in China. But if we look at China today, both innovation and entrepreneurship are very popular. So the country is changing. My question is, first question is, from the industry perspective, what do you see from European industry company, which are very good in technology and innovation? How do they cooperate with China today? What is the status from a general perspective? I will ask my second question later.
One experience I got over the years is that if you look at how Chinese are developing Chinese industry, the first step is quite common. That is copy. That's the first step. They copy in different ways what they found in the West, because this is good and we have been leading. The second step is collaborative approach. That means they find partners in Europe, America, and start to collaborate. But now what we see more and more is indigenous development. They are becoming good. They are knowledgeable, so they can move the technology to the next level. But still, they want to collaborate, because together they can create even more value than on their own. So collaboration is what they're looking for. But what I also see is that Western companies have a tendency to sell licenses that are from yesterday. They keep the latest one for themselves, and they lock out Chinese companies from the European market to keep it for themselves. Chinese know that when they buy licensing from the Western companies, they always get the licenses from yesterday, not what is the most advanced today. And that is why Chinese companies more and more are developing the skills to go on their own, because you only can take the lead in the world if you have the development capabilities. And that is what I see. More and more is moving in that direction. Large companies like Apple and others are putting R&D centers in China to come close to the market, but also to link themselves to all those huge number of universities and science parks, because they are booming in technology development. That cannot be done outside China. Only in Shanghai you have more than 70 universities and almost 80 science parks and incubators. One of those more than 800 companies. So those kind of areas are booming, that we don't really understand what is going on. We still think we are the leading one, and we still are in many areas, but they're catching up. In some areas they're bypassing 5G, for example, artificial intelligence. I can mention others. So if we don't start to collaborate with Chinese to jointly develop those technologies, I'm really afraid that we will lose at the end of the day.
Next question.
Yeah, there are some more
Well, I think that's also answering a little bit the question you're saying to me, that we need the Swedish cooperation with China, because we have a problem that we have a culture that the youth is not interested in technology in that more. They're more interested in the mellow festival and the music and all kinds of things, the computer games and things like that. So they're not really having a culture for science, for development, like we have in China now. So what we need is to catch up with that, because if we don't, if we have such a culture, we are not able to compete with innovation development in China. So we absolutely need to cooperate with China to be in the forefront of the technologies. So there are several ways we need to cooperate with China. I mean, also for infrastructure, for development, and also especially to come back to basics. And then we have a huge potential in Sweden with all the immigrants here, because the Belt and Road is a revolution in the world of the third world. The third world had a fight against colonialism, they had a fight for freedom and for development, get out of poverty and get economic development. And this is what the Belt and Road is. It has kind of taken the whole old movement on the non-aligned movement of the fight against colonialism and for development and brought it into the umbrella of the Belt and Road. And that means that every nation who are here as refugees, they could be partners in joining into development of Africa, South America, Asia, with Swedish companies. So we have a huge opportunity to unleash this enormous potential we have in the Swedish population today of all the culture connections we have. And Belt and Road could help us in that.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Ulf, for the answer. And I think it's very good answers, and especially from the Ulf part, I very agree that we can do a lot of initiatives, and the initiative today is very good. My second question is, I am helping a lot of Chinese company to establish a business relationship with a Swedish company. And my feeling so far right now is a lot of Swedish company, especially in high level, a little bit, they have kind of stereotype of the old China, as we mentioned here, and also they're a little bit afraid when it comes to security, when it comes to a lot of things when cooperating with Chinese companies. And we all would like to contribute that. And do you have any advices here that's helping those Chinese companies do a better job in my to do with, for example, the Swedish companies?
I spend about 2-3 months in Shanghai every year, and we are discussing with several institutions and science park in Shanghai. There are 2 new science parks being built up, one around artificial intelligence, the second one around 5G. And we know the China is taking the lead. 2 weeks ago, I talked to one company, quite one of the best we have in the country, about data communication, and I talked to the CEO about the request they have forwarded to me. If there are Swedish companies interested to set up activities in the science parks in Shanghai, together with Chinese companies, to develop technology, but also to boost up their products through collaboration. And they said, well, Mike, this is interesting, but you see, we collaborate with Ericsson. We don't dare to collaborate with Chinese in 5G. It's very, very sensitive. So they are afraid. On that I agree completely what you say, Alex. But my advice would be, if Chinese companies approach the Swedish companies directly, I think they will be even more afraid. I think Swedish companies also need to feel comfort, to create trust in those Chinese partners. So Chinese need Swedish people to help them to be bridges. As well as I learned from Jasmine and other colleagues in Shanghai, Chinese companies also need these kind of bridges to create trust and comfort. Swedish companies, Chinese companies in between, to be successful. There's one answer, one possible answer.
I want to follow up that just on I think two months ago, China sent the U-2 lander to the far side of the moon, which is the first time the human race ever landed something there. It's a big breakthrough for China and for mankind and for space exploration. On that rover, there's a Swedish instrument. So the Chinese allowed a Swedish technologist from, I think a researcher from S-Wing in Kiruna, from the Swedish, to have a component on YouTube. It analyzes, I think, the soil on that part of the moon. Now, it's a known issue that the Chinese space program, part of their exploration of the moon is to mine helium-3, which is abundant on the surface of the moon. And helium-3 is a perfect fuel for fusion power generation, and few amounts of that can provide free energy for all mankind for decades. But the issue, which we go back to this, people are afraid, so China had no problem placing a Swedish device, a country which is openly hostile to China, and we have policymakers and military researchers who say China is a big danger, Chinese companies are potentially spies. Chinese students in Sweden are also potentially spies because they are required to work with the authorities. But look at the irony that China allows one of its most sensitive operations to be integrated into a Swedish component. Now that this is there are people here in Sweden, because the question is not what companies can do. The problem is that the attitude of Sweden should change. We have unjustified, unfounded description of China by so-called experts and think tankers and some people in the media, which has absolutely nothing to do with reality. And that makes people terrified because it's like some sort of a McCarthyism. If you're positive to China, if you work with China, you are potentially a problematic person. And if you happen to be Chinese, that's even worse. You are maybe a spy. But it's that kind of policy, that kind of attitude among politicians and the media and think tankers that has to change. Of course, as Steve said, this is, and Tura said, this is part of the whole Western NATO geopolitical problem. But it's very important that we point out to and say correctly where the problem is, because people in companies, scientific researchers, they do want to work together, but then you have this political force which prevents that from happening. We have a discussion now in Sweden by people who are openly hostile to China. They say we have no real research about China. We know nothing about China. But those people mean that the government should employ them to tell what's going on in China. But those people have no idea what China. They studied in Taiwan and Japan and Hong Kong. Mostly, they maybe speak Chinese, some of them. But their idea to learn about China is as a hostile force, not to understand. But if it's a bit problematic in the sense that if you, like we have 349 parliamentarians, we can't send them to China to understand how China works, or the majority of journalists. But isn't there a need to have a real China study, some sort of a center which is not, biased in a sense to the Swedish establishment of the NATO, nor to China, to have a true research, because it's logistically very difficult to bring everybody to China to understand that. If you want to answer that question, maybe after Tura.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd like to make it. Can I be in the panel now?
Yes.
I'd like to answer Alex's second question by saying that, the West being afraid of China. My Chinese friends tells me, I understand that. We understand that. It's normal, quite normal for humans to be afraid of the innocent.
That's how it is. So the key is, and the answer to your question is, you know, you show patient, be patient, and you are patient. You know about time. We don't know about time. We just bash on. China is having time, and you will use the time. You used your Confucius, and you just give us time to understand you. And we are educating our countries in what China is. So when we know more about China, when we learn more about China, when we know more, then we are not afraid. It's quite normal to be afraid of what we don't know about. So, my suggestion is to study the founder of Huawei, Deng Xiaoping. Study his answer now. He did an interview yesterday. He did one 4 months ago, but he did one yesterday. The way that he answered what the Americans now are doing, that is a good start.
Yeah, I just, I mean, Hussein made the bulk of it. I just wanted to add that I think there's a big problem because what happens here is, number one, that they mix the fear factor with the propaganda.
Situation. The United Nations Security Council unanimously issued a resolution on stabilizing Afghanistan. In that resolution, they say that the Belt and Road is a key element in stabilizing Afghanistan and that region. The General Assembly also voted for a resolution on this question of sustainable development and connectivity, which also referenced the Belt and Road. We have the United Nations Development Program as a complete study on the importance of the Belt and Road for connectivity, global connectivity and sustainable development. And after the G20 meeting in Hangzhou in China in 2016, the G20 group, they recognized the Belt and Road as a basis for creating, now there's a real institution called Global Connectivity Institute, which is run by the World Bank in a sense, but it integrates all the ideas from the Belt and Road into that. And the United Nations, the 30 Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 also has positive view of the Belt and Road. So if you look at the official documents of the United Nations, the World Bank, they all positive to the Belt and Road. So that's already part of the sustainability discussion. But here we just, in the media and everywhere else, that's not being mentioned, it's not being discussed, but that's part of the United Nations Sustainable Goals agenda, actually.
Well, actually, in this agenda, it is very important because it's actually the whole third world has unanimously supported that, and it's part of the Chinese policy too. But in Sweden, we only speak about the climate part, which is number 17. We don't speak about the first issue, that is the number 1, which is development, and second is health, and I think third is development.
Hunger, poverty.
Eradicate hunger.
What?
Eradicate hunger.
Yeah. So this is the first points, and Swedes never take up the first points, which is the main idea of the Agenda 2030. So we should stress that they must go with the real content of this agenda. I think it's a good thing to show to people that we should follow this agenda. But just to summarize a little bit, 1 year ago we had this seminar with the Schiller Institute and the China-Sweden Business Council together, and then we decided to found this BRICS organization. And what we have found is that there is a tremendous lot of people around Sweden who wants to work with China, but they were isolated. We have been able with the BRICS to bring people together who didn't know about each other, and we are establishing an institution for information in Swedish about what is the Belt and Road initiative and what we can do together with China and with the whole world who are joining to that road. So in this way we are coming big steps forward, and we find everywhere people who want to do business with China and are doing business. Tremendous experience with big multinational companies and others are working with China. So we have lots and lots of cooperation. We have scientific cooperation with Sweden and China.
I think Sochi said that she wanted to say something before Ulf started. Yeah, you can.
To answer the previous question about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, I just wanted to share from student perspective. I remember last year I went to Chalmers University, and there was an event under Swedish financial agency called Finova. They are basically now trying to give finance to several startups that really concentrate on UN Sustainable Development Goals. I remember that there were several speakers that most of them are Swedish entrepreneurs, and they, some of them, I remember one company that they are working towards peer-to-peer lending, but they are focusing more to invest on solar panel in Africa. And also there also another startup that they are trying to help farmers to build some apps that can help the farmers to try to forecast the weather. And they are already cover several developing countries, I think, and that's also including China. So I think the movement or the action from Swedish people are actually already there, but it's still on a small scale, and it's obviously towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. But again, in the higher level, from the political people and parties, they should really support that so it could reach even bigger target later. So yeah, that's.
All right, a voice from the future, young people. With that, we conclude this forum, the second Belt and Road Forum. On behalf of the Belt and Road Executive Group in Sweden, I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the guests who came today, and even who stayed, even those who left earlier. So we have the information on the BRICS, our group, and the back side of the program. You all can become members in the BRICS and promote this work and help us spread the word. Thank you very much.